Hello everyone, and welcome to my The Bold Fans channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Electra's hands trembled as she sat in the cold, antiseptic holding cell, the metallic clank of the door still resonating in her head. The charge of murder hovered over her like a dark, smothering storm cloud. She hadn't killed anyone, but the evidence was piled against her. Blood on her scarf, a witness who claimed to have seen her near the crime site, and the motivation that the police quickly pinned on her. She slumped against the concrete wall, her breathing shallow, trying to figure out how her life had crumbled so rapidly. Just a few days ago, she was dreaming of love and freedom as she planned her future. Now she was a suspect in a crime she couldn't imagine committing. It all began with Luna, her best friend, or so she believed. Luna had always been the brightest star, illuminating every room with her joy and charisma. Electra, who was quieter and more reserved, had been comfortable standing in her shadow, glad for their companionship. But Luna's life was not as idyllic as it appeared. She'd been hiding something dark and frightening, which Electra only discovered by mistake. It was late at night in Luna's apartment, and the two of them were sharing a bottle of wine, when Electra discovered a note stashed away in a drawer. The words were enigmatic, but they alluded to a secret Luna had kept from everyone, including her closest confidant. A secret connected to Bill, the man who had swept Luna off her feet with his charm and promises of eternity. Bill was a mystery to Electra. He was older, wiser, and had a smile that could disarm anyone. But his eyes were steely, calculating, and this made Electra uneasy. Luna, however, was smitten. She referred to Bill as her savior, the one who would bring her out of the turmoil of her past. Electra tried to be pleased for her, but something about Bill never felt right. The letter confirmed her suspicions. It wasn't just a love letter or a casual communication. It was a confession, written in Bill's precise handwriting, admitting to something awful. A betrayal. A crime. A secret that could cost lives. Electra confronted Luna that night, her voice quivering as she held up the letter. "What is this, Luna? What did Bill do?" Luna's face was devoid of color, her customary confidence replaced by panic. She snatched the letter from Electra's grasp, her eyes frantic. "You weren't supposed to see that," she murmured. "You do not comprehend. You can't tell anyone." But Electra persisted, wanting information. Luna's voice trembled as she acknowledged the truth. Bill had been involved in something criminal, which had resulted in someone's death. She didn't go into detail, instead pleading with Electra to remain silent in order to protect her and Bill. Electra's heart fell. She adored Luna, but this was too much. She couldn't keep that secret. The next day, Electra reported to the police. She didn't want to betray Luna, but she couldn't bear the consequences of what she knew. She believed she was doing the right thing, and that the truth would set them all free. Instead, it set off a chain reaction that she had no control over. The cops did not merely question Bill. They also investigated Electra. The scarf she'd left at Luna's apartment that night was discovered at the site of a homicide. A man named Victor, whom Electra had never seen, had been discovered dead, and her scarf was entangled in the evidence. The witness, a stranger Electra did not know, claimed to have seen her near Victor's apartment the night he died. And the motivation? The police felt Electra was envious of Luna's connection with Bill, and that she murdered Victor to frame him and break them apart. It was ludicrous, yet the parts fit together too well. Electra's pleas for innocence fell on deaf ears. When questioned, Luna did not defend herself. Instead, she remained mute, avoiding Electra's gaze during their brief encounter at the station. That betrayal went deeper than the chilly handcuffs on Electra's wrists. Luna, the person she had most trusted, had abandoned her. Meanwhile, Bill's secret began to surface in the public glare. The letter Electra discovered was not the only evidence of his wrongdoing. Reporters delved into his past, revealing a web of lies and machinations. Bill had played a role in Victor's death, albeit indirectly, through a failed transaction. Victor was a business colleague to whom Bill owed money, and he had threatened to expose him. The details were hazy, but the headlines screamed scandal. Bill's pleasant mask broke, and Luna was caught in the aftermath. She stood with him, even as the world turned against him. Electra couldn't grasp it. How could Luna cling to a guy who had caused so much pain? The hospital became the next chapter in the catastrophe. Will, Electra's younger brother, has been battling a serious disease for some years. He was the only bright spot in her life, the reason she kept fighting when everything else fell apart. Will was in the hospital when Electra was arrested, and his condition deteriorated. She was not allowed to see him, hold his hand, or assure him everything was fine. The thought of him lying there alone broke her heart. Will was unaware of the arrest and had no idea why his sister had not come to see him. The nurses informed her that he had been asking for her. His voice feeble but hopeful. When she finally had the chance to call him, her voice trembled as she attempted to explain. "I'm fine, Will," she lied. "I'll be there soon." But the tears flowed anyhow, and she hung up before he could hear her sob. Days and weeks passed, and Electra's world shrank to the jail and the courtroom. Her attorney fought for her, but the evidence was damning. The scarf, the witness, the motive, all of it suggested guilt. Electra's only hope was that the truth about Bill would come out, that someone would connect the connections and realize she was innocent. But Luna's quiet was deafening. Electra couldn't help but worry whether Luna knew more than she let on, if she'd helped set Electra up to fail. The thought was awful, but it persisted, chewing at her. One night, alone in her cell, Electra closed her eyes and allowed herself to recollect the good times. She remembered Will's laughing, how he teased her about her horrible cooking. She remembered Luna and how they had spent the entire night discussing their dreams. She imagined the life she desired. Simple, full of love and tiny pleasures. That existence seemed so far away today, like a dream she could scarcely remember. The weight of her situation pressed down on her, and for the first time she allowed herself to cry, not just for herself, but also for Will, Luna, and the broken trust. Will's condition deteriorated while he was hospitalized. Electra was not present when the doctors broke the news to their parents. She wasn't present as Will spoke her name one final time. The guilt of her absence would plague her indefinitely. When she learnt of his death days later, in a frigid courtroom, she didn't scream or collapse. She sat there paralyzed, as the world she knew faded away completely. The trial dragged on, but the truth started to emerge, piece by agonizing piece. A new witness came forward, saying they had seen Bill near Victor's apartment that night. The scarf, it found out, had been planted in a desperate attempt to deflect culpability. Luna finally broke her silence, confessing she was aware of Bill's involvement but had been too terrified to speak anything. Her evidence was sad, and her apologies rang empty in Electra's ears. Bill was caught, and Electra's accusations were withdrawn, but the victory seemed hollow. Will was gone. Luna's treason could not be undone. Electra, though free, bore scars that would never heal. She stood outside the hospital for the last time, peering out the window of the room where Will had spent his dying days. The chilly wind cut at her flesh, but she remained motionless. She wasn't sure where to go or who to turn to. The world seemed wide and empty, and she was alone in it. All she had left was the memory of her brother's smile and the small hope that one day, she would be able to forgive herself, not Luna or Bill. The news hit like a sudden storm in a peaceful town. Electra was led away in shackles, her face wan and her eyes empty, as flashing red and blue lights cut through the darkness. The neighbors muttered behind curtains, children asked questions no one dared to answer, and Luna, who had previously trusted in her friend's innocence above all else, felt her heart shatter into 1,000 unidentifiable pieces. Everything had happened so swiftly. One moment, joy, trust, and the tenuous possibility of rebuilding their lives. The next, suspicion, accusations, and the heavy thud of a jail cell door closing. The next morning, Luna stood outside the courthouse, her coat snug about her, despite the September sun's warmth. She couldn't remove the image of Electra's shaking hand as the cops led her away. That hand had once supported Luna when anguish threatened to drown her. That hand had once brushed away her tears and promised, "You are not alone." And suddenly that same hand was marked with mistrust. Murder. The term lingered in Luna's head, piercing and vicious, ripping through every memory she treasured. But what worried Luna the most was the secret Bill had kept. For years he had concealed it behind the persona of a dedicated father, a loyal friend, a guy whose advice was sought and whose voice could calm any tempest. However, when the truth came out, it shattered the basis of trust more viciously than Electra's incarceration ever could. Luna discovered the letter by chance, buried among ancient books in Bill's study. A confession written but never spoken. He had lied about that night years ago when everything in their life changed forever. She had sat there, clutching the letter, her breathing shallow. Tears clouded her vision, making the words blurry. The secret was not only unexpected, but also terrible. Bill had shielded himself while leaving others bleeding. He had chosen silence while Electra was accused of sins she may not have done. The hospital became the location for the unraveling of everything. Will, Bill's son, had collapsed unexpectedly, his body unable to bear the strain of stress and anguish. Luna was present when the equipment beeped frantically. Nurses hurried in, and Bill's voice trembled as he begged his son to hold on. The sterile smell of antiseptic and the echo of hurried footsteps became the music to a tragedy neither of them had anticipated. Luna sat in the waiting room with her face buried in her hands. She wanted to scream and demand explanations from the universe. How could everything have fallen apart so quickly? Just days before, she believed in friendship, family, and unbreakable relationships. Now she could only feel the rough edges of betrayal, loss, and sorrow. Behind chilly walls, Electra screamed for her purity, but no one seemed to listen. Bill struggled with the weight of his secret, knowing that while disclosing the truth might save Electra, it would destroy what little remained of his family. And Will, unconscious and delicate in the hospital bed, became a silent witness to their anguish, his breathing faint and uncertain. Luna moved down the clean corridor, her legs languid and her chest heavy. She halted at Will's door, observing the boy she had seen grow up. His face was pale, his lips dry, and he nevertheless exuded an innocence that none of them deserved. She stretched out, wiping a strand of hair off his brow and murmuring promises she wasn't certain she could keep. The night seemed unending. Bill sat slumped in a chair, eyes empty and body trembling. Luna wanted to despise him, yell at him for the lies, the misery, and the way his quiet had brought them all here. But when she watched him crumble, when she saw the father holding to his son's hand with a raw desperation that ripped through every wall she had created, her rage became entwined with anguish. Outside, life continued as usual. Cars honked, laughter streamed from restaurants, and people went about their daily lives unaware of the catastrophe happening in that quiet hospital room. Inside, however, time seemed to stand still. Every second was filled with fear, and every breath was a tenuous hope that Will would open his eyes again. Electra's trial drew ahead, and Luna knew the truth couldn't be hidden long. Bill's secret had to come out. But how much would it cost? Would saving Electra mean losing Will? Would speaking the truth mean shattering the fragile remnants of the family she once thought was unbreakable? She closed her eyes and listened to the machines, the hum of fluorescent lights, and Bill's voice to his kid. She thought about Electra alone in her cell, the hard concrete pressing against her back. She reflected on the lost years, the broken trust, and the tattered and bleeding love that had once linked them all together. Sadness took on life, filling Luna's chest and weighing down every thought. She had always believed that love and forgiveness could heal, but as she stood there, divided between loyalty, truth, and pain, she knew that some scars were too deep to ever be completely healed. Still she remained. She stayed because quitting meant ultimate surrender to despair. She stayed because even in the face of treachery, love endured. It persisted, delicate and persistent, like a flame refusing to go out in the wind. So in that hospital room where loss and hope met, Luna prayed for strength. She prayed that Electra's name would be cleared, that Bill would have the fortitude to reveal the truth, and that Will would open his eyes and remind them all that even in the darkest of stories, there was always something worth holding on to. The hospital nights blended together. Luna found herself in a weird limbo where time held no meaning. Morning bled into afternoon, afternoon into night, but everything inside those walls remained motionless in anticipation. Will remained motionless, his chest rising and falling in a frail rhythm, connected to devices that kept hope alive. The youngster who used to fill rooms with joy and seemed to have a bright future was now limited to whispers and prayers. Bill wouldn't leave his side. He sat in the rigid chair, immovable but for the occasional grasp of his son's hand, as if hanging on tightly enough would bring him back. His hair was untidy, his complexion pale, and his eyes were rimmed with sleepless nights. To anybody else, he could have appeared to be a heartbroken father. But Luna saw past it. She saw shame in every action, In the way his lips pushed together when the stillness became too heavy, and in the way he averted her stare as if she could read the truth in his eyes. The letter weighed heavily on her conscience. She had buried it away, where no one else could discover it, but it remained in her mind. She read it over and over in her thoughts, the words imprinted on her. Bill's secret was more than a mistake from the past. It was a decision that altered the path of their entire lives. His silence had created doubt around Electra, allowing her to bear responsibility for something she had never completely owned. Bill would mutter pieces of sentences in the late hours of the night when exhausted, such as, I should have told them, or it wasn't supposed to happen like this. Luna never challenged him on this. She wanted to, but the thought of what he could say had her chest constrict till she could not breathe. Meanwhile, Electra remained behind jail. Luna attempted to visit her, bringing minor comforts such as books or notes, but nothing could break through the hollow misery in her eyes. Electra used to be powerful, fiery, and unyielding, but prison had depleted her. Do you believe me? She whispered one day, her voice so soft it almost vanished. Luna's throat stung when she nodded. I believe you. I always have, she answered, but doubt lingered in the corners of her heart. Not because she believed Electra was capable of murder, but because the public had already branded her as guilty. Evidence was manipulated, tales were changed, and the system pressed down with such force that no truth appeared to be able to resist. Belief was weak when the rest of the world shouted the opposite. When Luna went home from the hospital at night, she sat in her lonely apartment, staring at the walls that contained so many memories. She recalled the first time she and Electra had met, their laughter echoing across a busy cafe. She remembered the evenings spent at Bill's house, watching Will play in the yard while the adults plotted their futures, which now seemed like broken glass beneath their feet. One memory in particular tortured her. The night of the storm. Years ago, when everything began to collapse, lightning struck the sky and rain battered against the windows. That was the night Bill vanished for hours, returning with drenched clothes and frantic eyes. He had claimed it was nothing but a desire to clear his mind. However, the letter indicated differently. He had been someplace else. He had been involved in anything that resulted in a fatality. Now, as Luna saw him by his son's side, she wrestled with the internal conflict. If she exposed his truth, Electra might be set free, but Will may lose his father forever. If she remained silent, Electra's life would continue to rot in a cell. Either option represented a betrayal. She cried frequently during those days, but always in silence. Tears in the hospital bathroom, tears in her car before stepping inside to see Electra, and tears in her bed, where no one could see her cry. Sadness was no longer an emotion. It had become a constant companion, a shadow that never left her. The worst moment occurred one early morning just before dawn, when the robots surrounding Will abruptly sounded their alarms. Nurses raced in, physicians yelling commands, and Bill dropped forward, sobbing for his son. Luna slammed her back against the wall, her legs quivering and her vision blurred as panic spread around her. She prayed, begged, and promised whatever she could think of if Will would stay. And after what seemed like an age, the tumult receded. The boy's heart had calmed, and his tenuous hold on life had been restored. Bill went to his knees, holding the side of the bed, tears flowing down his cheeks. In that moment he appeared smaller than Luna had ever seen him before. Not the strong, powerful man she had always idolized, but a father broken, drowning in remorse and dread. Later, when the room became quiet again, Luna sat next him. Bill, she said softly, her voice quivering, you can't keep hiding it. The truth will come out. It has to. He did not respond at first. His shoulders trembled and his head bowed. Finally, he turned his hollow eyes to her. If I tell, I'll lose him. If I don't, I'll lose her. His voice trembled. How should I choose? Luna's heart squeezed. There was no proper answer, no road that didn't involve sorrow. She only knew that secrets had already damaged too much. And while she sat there holding Bill's shaky hand, she wondered if they would still be together when the truth came out. The hospital lights flashed overhead, casting harsh shadows on exhausted faces. The world outside continued to spin, but within those walls, 3 souls remained suspended between sorrow and hope, betrayal and forgiveness, guilt and love. And Luna, trapped in the center, could only keep breathing, praying, and waiting for a miracle that none of them genuinely believed would come.